Okay, hello everyone. Good morning and apologies for starting 12 minutes late. I was actually logged in. I had to do something else and got distracted. All right. Um, Today is day 3 on the security operations analyst training using the Microsoft SC200 as a guide and overview. Um, for those who are just joining today for the first time, what we are trying to achieve with the intermediate session is to take you through an operators analyst activities for Microsoft security and using the security.microsoft platform and seeing how Microsoft handles security operations using this platform. On the first day, we did an overview of what even security threats are and what common threats are. And then the things that are very important, we call them the 5 entities that are very important and need to be protected. And we call those 5 entities the email, the identity, the endpoint, the apps, your secret keys. And we categorize this 5 entities as like the foundation pillars that need to be protected in any organization. And we went ahead to look at how Microsoft security operations looks into the activities that happen on these 5 entities. We looked at the Microsoft Defender Microsoft Defender family, where Microsoft has 5 key Defender families and how they interact and send their signals into the security center that enables a security operator analyst to be able to interpret those detections and activities. We went further to see how the Microsoft Defender for endpoint will protect the endpoint as an entity. And so we looked at the endpoint entity from either being your laptop, your mobile device, your network devices, your IoT devices. And then we looked at how the Microsoft Defender was able to get signals. We looked at how Microsoft had already leveraged on these sensors that exist on Windows 10 or Windows Server 2019 and how creating the environment and integrating this environment into the security center will enable you as an analyst see detections. We did an overview of the security.microsoft portal and looked at incidents alerts, how incidents and alerts are aggregated, or rather how alerts are aggregated to become incidents, and how as an analyst you can expand those incidents and get a deep dive view into what has happened on an endpoint. We went further to also look at, how devices are discovered in an organization and the amount of information that Defender for Endpoint will give you when a device has been discovered. We were able to see full visibility from software inventory to exposure level of those devices in the environment. So as an analyst, there's great insight into what the security.microsoft portal shows you for any environment where it's being used. And this progressed into last week, where we also looked at how to handle these detections. And then we looked at the attack surface reduction. The attack surface reduction functionality or capability was introduced into the Defender for Endpoint and how it enables you to improve on the security on the endpoints, how you will create attack surface reduction rules and further increase the security posture of your environment. So today, what are we doing? In an organization, if you look at what we have done in the last 2 weeks, we focused more on endpoints, right? And so, and then beyond even looking at endpoint, we looked at the Defender family that had the Defender for identity, Defender for email, the vulnerability management, and the Microsoft Defender for endpoint. But as an organization with the current high increase in consumption of cloud services, Microsoft has seen that lots of organizations have services that are hosted on the cloud. As a cloud service provider, it's been seen that services are hosted on the cloud. And so the Defender capabilities has been extended to what we call the Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at how to mitigate threats using the Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And the Microsoft Defender for Cloud, we'll be looking at how you plan for cloud workload protections, okay, using Microsoft Defender for Cloud, how you will connect your Azure assets to the Defender for Cloud, how you will connect how you manage your cloud security posture. So your posture level, if you remember, when we looked at the Defender for Endpoint, we looked at posture levels when we talked about secure score and exposure score. So once your secure score is high, it means that your organization is more, as in like your security posture is good. And once under your threat and vulnerability, your secure score, your exposure score, your secure score rather is high, it means that you have more exposure. We saw the difference between those two under the security of Microsoft. And so we'll also be looking at secure posture management in Defender for Cloud and workload protections. What are the workloads? You know, we've already said we'll look at how to plan for workloads and then the kind of workloads that you can protect in the Defender for Cloud, and then look at how to remediate security alerts. We might split this into two classes depending on how it goes, but we'll be looking at the Defender for Cloud. So you want to, so how, you know, to kickstart this, you want to plan for your cloud workload protections using Defender for Cloud. So we'll briefly look at what Defender for Cloud, the features, explain what Defender for Cloud workload protection means, and then we will now look at enabling Defender for Cloud. So when we say cloud, you know, in layman term, we're looking at services that are hosted in environments that are not owned by you. So we have Microsoft Azure, we have the AWS cloud services, we have the GCP, the Google Cloud Protection. These are like the major cloud service providers that we know. And so what you want to do is you want to know your security posture from an identity. You want to track vulnerabilities on this environment because you have services that are hosted on this environment. Microsoft will call them workloads. You know, either you have web applications hosted here, you have storage accounts, you have keys, all of the security keys on this platform. You have virtual machines, you have containers. You want to be able to, you know the security posture through continuous access because these platforms are continuously assessed. So as a security operator, you want to be able to know what's the security posture of these workloads. You want to be able to identify and track vulnerabilities as they occur on these endpoints or on these workloads rather. You also want to have the ability to be able to harden resources. You want to be able to look and enhance, you know, secure those environments more by introducing hardening. And so Microsoft has what they call the Azure Security Benchmark. So the Azure is Microsoft's own cloud platform. And so Microsoft has created what they call the Azure Security Benchmark that you can use to harden these services. These are basic benchmarks. For those who already have, you know, experience in service management, for instance, in server management, you will know that by default, when you provision a server, you have administrator enabled and probably you have guests. So as a security consultant or security personnel, what you do most times during your compliance and governance is to say things like administrator should be disabled, guest account should be disabled, create a unique administrator account. You see those security benchmarks, right? On the Microsoft Defender for Cloud, it gives you the ability to use the Microsoft has created a security benchmark portfolio that you can use to match across your workloads and ensure that by default your workloads operate on this benchmark. And so that gives you a certain level of security. You know that, okay, administrator accounts are not enabled. You know, one of the greatest challenge that we have with cloud is in moving to the cloud, a lot of people began to lose control of those security and configurations that we did while our services were in personally owned data centers. So the struggles for auditors, for control officers, for security administrators, for server admins, for IT administrators, is to see how services that are hosted on the cloud, we still ensure that we maintain those security guidelines, security postures, you know, security configurations. So Microsoft Defender for Cloud will enable you to check your security benchmark, and then you can use the Azure Security Benchmark to ensure baseline security configurations. Also, the Defender for Endpoint will help you to now defend, like Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Cloud, to help you to defend, thereby detecting and resolving threats to resources, workload, and services. So the same automation and remediation capabilities we saw in Security Center, the Defender for Cloud will enable you to also detect resolve these threats and resolve these threats either in your resources or your workloads or your services. If there are any questions, please, you can interrupt and then we'll ask so that we don't wait all to the end of the class and you don't miss out from any questions. Any questions so far? All right. So when we talk about workloads, the term workload is used to refer to the services that are hosted on this cloud platform. So for the Microsoft Azure, which is Microsoft's own cloud platform, a server is a workload, your app services is a workload, your SQL databases are workloads, your Azure databases are workloads, your open source databases are also workloads, your storage location, your containers, your key vault, your resource manager, your DNS services, all of these are workloads, right, that you have hosted on the cloud. Now, if you remember, we were looking at security analyst operation using security.micro, and it was focusing on Defender for Endpoint, Office, email. Now we're extending it to say for cloud services, Microsoft Defender for Cloud enables you to see visibility into all your workloads. Okay, all your workloads. So it will allow you gain advanced intelligent protection into your workloads, and it can extend this even into a hybrid environment. What do we mean by hybrid? So you have your data center in your organization, probably hosted in your office head office or hosted in another location. With Microsoft, we already know that for your identity, your Active Directory, you can extend, where your users are created in your on-prem Active Directory, but you can extend those identities to the Azure Active Directory so that those people can still use those credentials to log into cloud services, right? So in that same way, can you extend Microsoft Cloud for the Microsoft Defender for cloud services to on-prem infrastructures so that the Defender for cloud services can still manage your on-prem data center services. So we'll just look at how to manage a cloud security posture. We'll look at some of the tasks you take away is how you protect against threats, and then the insights. We'll go through those demos. Now, the first thing you want to do is to enable your Defender for Cloud. So if you already have a Azure subscription as an organization, all you want to do is to go to enable the Defender for Cloud features that will give you, protection capabilities. And then you must also enable the security enhanced feature, that would also enable these configurations for different workloads. So that's the first thing you want to do. You want to go to the Defender, you want to enable it. The good thing about this is that Microsoft gives you, what they call it, 30 days free trial, where that you can enable this and then use it for 30 days to understand what is happening. We'll be looking at that, and then how to enable it for the workloads. How do you connect your Azure assets to the Defender for Cloud? You want to look at auto provisioning, manual provisioning, how you explore your assets. So we have what we call the inventory, just the same way we had the device inventory in Defender for Endpoint. We also have asset inventory where the Defender for Cloud can look at your total resources and classify them into unhealthy resources, unmonitored resources, unregistered subscription, and then you can use agent monitoring and recommend certain and do certain recommendations. So we have what we call the auto provisioning. The auto provisioning will allow for Defender to collect data from your Azure machines, your virtual machines, your infrastructure as a service containers. These are different, workloads, and it will allow you to collect these logs just by enabling the auto provisioning capability. If you want to go to settings, you click on auto provisioning, you will be able to enable the log analytics for the VMs to collect this configuration. We'll also be looking at that when we go into the demo platform. The manual logistics agent. So what basically what I'm saying is that there are ways to enable the Defender for Cloud. You can either do auto provisioning where you go to the settings and enable the auto provisioning configuration. And once you enable it for your Azure VMs, you'll be able to automatically, as those VMs are powered up, begin to integrate them into the Microsoft Defender for Cloud. However, you can also have the manual one where you want to manually install the log analytics agent. So you would have disabled auto provisioning and then enable Defender for Cloud by installing your log agents manually on those VMs. And there are different ways of doing this. You can either use a resource manager. Now, as a security operator analyst, this might not be your responsibility, but these are the things that you expect the administrators to do in order for you to begin to get these telemetries into the Defender for Cloud to allow you to see visibility on those endpoints or those workloads and, give insight into what's happening. Another good thing is that we can connect non-Azure machines to Defender for Cloud. We can connect AWS accounts to Defender for Cloud, and we can connect Google Cloud platforms to Defender for Cloud. Yes, we can. That's the good thing for Defender for Cloud. So if you're an organization that has Defender for Cloud, but you have some of your workloads spread across both the Azure platform, AWS, and the GCP. As a security operator, you can gain one visibility of all these different entities from the Defender for Cloud interface. You can use the security functionalities of Defender for Cloud to gain insights and improve on the security and defend, from threats and attacks on non-Azure machines, on AWS accounts and GCP accounts. So when we say non-Azure machines, what are we referring to? Yeah, we're referring to your on-prem. So remember when I said that Microsoft Defender allows you to extend these capabilities to your on-prem. Now we can protect non-Azure resources. Remember the terminology for those who are new. Azure is Microsoft's own cloud service platform where you host workloads like virtual machines, servers, SaaS solutions, infrastructure as service solutions. All these things are hosted on Microsoft's own cloud platform. That's Azure. The same way you have your AWS for Amazon, and then you have your GCP for Google Cloud platforms, right? So now Microsoft Defender for Cloud sits on the Azure, right? So it's easy for us. We're going to see how easy it is to integrate those workloads that are on Azure. But as a security operator analyst, your responsibility to an organization is to gain insight across all the workloads. It doesn't matter where they are hosted. As a security operator analyst, your role is to ensure the security posture of the cloud services, is to ensure that you can gain insight into what's happening, you can gain visibility, and you can help make defensive decisions or proactive decisions or configurations that can increase the security posture of your organization. Now, Microsoft is saying that you can now extend the Defender for Cloud to non-Azure. So if you had on-prem infrastructures, okay, using what we call the Azure Arc, we can extend the capabilities of the Defender for Cloud into the on-prem environment. Yeah, so they are based on configuration. We can create workloads, so we can create an Azure Resource Manager and extend that Azure management to on-prem environment where you have your resources, your server, your storage. The Defender for Cloud will now give us insights into what's happening to those environments from a security perspective. We can also one of the ways you can also do this is by installing your Azure Arc on the host, and in the Azure portal, you now connect that also. From a design perspective, there will be an intermediary, a host connector that will be on your on-prem environment, and that host connector is the one that would receive those telemetries from the internal resources or internal workloads, and then that host would feed those information to the Azure. We feed those information to the Azure Resource Manager where the Defender for Cloud is. Okay, and then you can also, again, in this instance, manually deploy. And when we say non-Azure machines, it's still cut across to everything, cut across to Windows, cut across to Linux, all of this on your on-prem environment. Services, machines that are not hosted in your Azure, can be managed by Defender for Cloud. We can also see here that you can extend, Defender for Cloud to integrate with your AWS Security Hub, right? So you already have your AWS Security Hub where your workloads feed into, but you want Defender to provide visibility and to also use its security protection capabilities on those environments. It is possible, and that way you can see your secure score, how you match from a security perspective across your AWS platform, how you are meeting regulatory compliance, how your workloads are being protected. You can gain all of this by using the Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Just by onboarding your AWS account into the Defender for Cloud, it will be able to give us visibility into the AWS Security Hub and then pull up all the workloads that you have on AWS and give us the security posture of those resources. The same thing also applies for the Google Cloud Platform. Same way, by onboarding the Google Cloud Platform account into Defender for Cloud, not to go into the nitty-gritty, create like a service account that has access to these workloads, and then we integrate it into Defender for Cloud, and then it will be able to also give us this visibility across. So as a security operator analyst, you do not have to worry about, oh, when I want to know what's happening on my AWS platform, I'll go and log into AWS Security Hub. I'll go and log into GCP Security Command Center just to be able to see and pull one report. Microsoft Defender for Cloud has allowed us to pull this data, these telemetries from these different cloud providers into the Defender for Cloud, and then you can gain visibility. And in that visibility that you gain, you can see how you match into regulatory compliance using different regulatory standards that Microsoft has benchmarked, things like the ISO 27001, your AWS CIS, your SOC TSP. You can gain this visibility. You can see how your other cloud platforms, and the workloads that are hosted there match into this. And then you can now use the same CIS benchmark, security benchmark, to match across these. So if the CIS benchmark says that don't use administrator service accounts, and in your AWS platform you're using it, it will flag it that service accounts are being called administrators, or service accounts password do not match this password complexity, or you have certain kind of ports, and then you have unencrypted ports enabled for inbound connections. You have non-encrypted platforms. It will give you all those visibilities and match it across the regulatory standards just from one interface. Do we have any questions? Okay, so this is how you manage your secure score. So once you log into your Defender for Cloud secure posture, you will be able to see your security posture, and you can see here that it's been able to. You can see here that it's been able to group all the cloud platforms for us. So you can see here, there's Azure, there's Azure, there's AWS, there's GCP. We can gain all these visibilities from the security posture view. So you can, at this instance, begin to see that, in my Azure, I have my security posture is 70%. In my AWS is 30%. In my GCP is 37%. Remember when we said security posture, when it's high for security secure score, when your secure score is high, it means that you are more secure. When it's low, it means that you have more exposure for secure score. So in this instance, imagine as a security operator, you can see in one view what your security posture is about, and then you can see unhealthy resources. You can click here and see the resources that it has classified as unhealthy, right? And you can also see recommendations that it gives, and it also goes further down to expand the environment, into categories. So here you can see the secure score per the environment. So in this instance, we can see that, there's an AWS connector, that has a secure score of 33%, and inside here we have 218 of these resources, unhealthy. And then if you click, you can now see recommendation on what Microsoft is using to recommend to you on how you can fix this issue. So you don't even have to worry yourself most times on, okay, this thing that is the problem, how do I fix it? You can see recommendations, and then those recommendations can now be extracted and discussed as a team and discussed in line with your organization policies and procedures, discussed in line with your organization's change management control, and then you can now effect them, which will help your secure score become high and your security posture. So from a security posture management, you can gain one insight and visibility on what's happening in your organization and how to improve on this posture over time, and then create, a good posture level for your organization. Okay. Okay. Now, this also is giving us a clear insight as to how Secure Score would do recommendations for us. Yeah, so you can see here that in this organization, the Secure Score is 65%, right? It has about 15 active controls, and then out of 120 recommendations, it has only implemented 28. Out of the controls, it has 15 controls that it has implemented. Now, it gives you this is a summary of the kind of recommendations you will see that will cut across, your secure score. So you can see things like enable MFA, secure management ports. So places where people have set up virtual machines and have enabled non-secure management ports. As a secure analyst, this integration with Defender can give you those kind of visibilities. Most times when application people are trying to go live on applications and they create the design for the applications and request for certain ports, even when it has gone through design and architect stage and gotten approval, and then they've gone live, over time, because things are being fixed, remediations are being happening, operation, business as usual is going on. Most times, administrators or security admins begin to change configurations. So a security operator, before an incident will occur, you want to even see how is my organization doing, because the truth is, before any threat happens, these things already exist, these loopholes already exist that the attackers exploit. So you want to be able to begin to see what's happening in your organization. Have people changed the management ports? Are people now using non-secure management ports, on sensitive servers? Are systems out of system updates? Do we have XYZ type of vulnerabilities on our workloads? And these vulnerabilities, if you look at them and match them across the CVE, they are very exploitable vulnerabilities, and there are patches to fix those vulnerabilities, but nobody is even knowing that we have those vulnerabilities. So for instance, when Log4j, when the Log4j vulnerability broke the internet and everybody was worried, people who were on Defender for Cloud, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Cloud and Security with Microsoft didn't have to worry, because it called out clearly things that existed on those workloads and endpoints that were exploitable. So if you had applications that had embedded Java extensions used for those applications, and the Java extensions were vulnerable to Log4j, it would flag it. So as a security operator, you wanted to gain, in order for you to deliver on your job, that level of visibility is very, very important. You want to be able to see clear cut, where your organization is vulnerable, what level of vulnerability exists in your organization. You also want to even see from access and permission perspective, which people have access to these workloads. What do they need this access for? Probably somebody has exited the organization and somebody has not taken away somebody's right. You want to be able to see. You also want to see your web portals, your web services. What level of protection are they protected from DDoS attacks? You want to also even see Do we have auditing and logging enabled on some of these things? There are certain endpoints and workloads that must have auditing and logging. So you see all these configurations that exist and can be changed when services move from development to test to business as usual. They are the things that when these changes begin to occur, they begin to set the organization on a downward or upward exposure level. So it's a continuous fix. That's why you need to have one view or one pane where you can see what is my organization's secure score. Because as tweaks begin to happen, as configuration changes begin to happen, as business as usual keeps happening on the infrastructure, the security operator wants to see at every instance, how is our organization exposed? And what are the things do we need to do? So is it a behavioral thing? Are we finding out that every time people go live, this is what they do? Or are we finding out that, people are giving access to people without going through the process? Or are we having MFA not enabled on services? It would give us the number of resources that have this thing and, based on this recommendation. So as we fix this recommendation, our secure score will begin to match up. It can also even help us to measure compliance with regulatory, requirements. So a lot of us are working in organizations where you need to match certain regulatory requirements. So if you have services that are involved in card transactions hosted on any of your cloud platforms, so lots of fintech statistics show that a lot of fintechs were, hosting services on the AWS platform. That you are hosting services on cloud platform does not isolate you or exempt you as an organization from meeting regulatory requirements. The cloud service concept was to enable organizations remove the pressure of owning infrastructures, right? But it does not mean that that service automatically is exempted from meeting regulatory compliance based on what they are providing. So as a fintech who it was easy for you to build your services and host them on AWS and go live, you wanted to worry about the level of security. You wanted to worry about your security posture on those workloads. You wanted to know these services that I have launched that are providing easy transaction for people in XYZ area. These services, since my service that I've launched, is involved with card transaction, automatically I must meet with PCI DSS requirements. And you wanted to gain that visibility. You wanted to know. You wanted to find out that, okay, what do I need to do? I'm hosting on the cloud. What are the available things that my cloud provider has for me that can enable me to meet these regulatory requirements? So you wanted to measure your compliance level. Defender for Cloud will enable you to do this. Now, don't forget that because Defender for Cloud allows you to integrate other third-party cloud providers into it, it will still be able to see what is your compliance measurement of these platforms. Okay, and then you can be able to see, oh, how many controls that I have passed. So I can see my compliance level. If it's PCI DSS that my service needs to match, this is the compliance level. If it's the AWS PCI DSS standard, it will be able to show you. If it will be the AWS CIS standard, your SOC TSP, whatever those standards are, it will be able to show you. And then the Azure Security Benchmark involves things like network security, identity management, privilege access, data protection, asset management. There are lots of different security benchmark. Okay, now based on this benchmark, and controls, it will take it and measure you on the compliance. So it could say PCI DSS says that for identity, you should not have XYZ. Okay, the Azure Security Benchmark would take and say, we have said that you should do A. Now, if we match that across the PCI DSS standards, this is your score. You meet PCI DSS requirements. Our security benchmark cuts across all these compliance, and then when you are measured across them, because you've used the security benchmark configurations, you are able to, match these compliance requirements. So imagine yourself as a security operator having this level of ease of administration, to be able to deliver on your job. Okay, so we Any questions so far? All right, workload protections in Defender. We'll look at how workloads are protected, the benefits of this protection, and then how Defender for Endpoint protects these functions. So we have the Microsoft Defender for servers. I won't go into licensing details. There are different licensing details. It doesn't matter. It depends on what your organization wants to use it for. How many workloads do you have? What time are these workloads up? When do you want to check, these vulnerabilities? All of those things tie into license. But however, the Microsoft Defender for servers, okay, leverages on the Defender for endpoint. So remember that the Defender for endpoint we have talked about previously was not limited to only laptops. When we're looking at it in the last two classes, the Defender for endpoint covered your endpoint. Your endpoint could either be servers and laptops. So in the cloud service, for the Defender for cloud to be able to pick up certain telemetries, it was going to leverage the Defender for endpoint to servers. So it would deploy, depending on the plan that you have, it would deploy the Defender for endpoint to those servers, and then be able to help you gather those cloud workloads so that you know when they are, protected. And then you can also still gain those same vulnerability, threat and vulnerability management inside, attack surface reductions, next generation firewall, all those functionalities that were in the Defender for endpoint, you can extend it to they're extended to Defender for servers using the Defender for endpoint that has been installed on your servers. Any question? Also, inside the Defender for endpoint, we have what we call the Defender for app services. One of the value add of cloud service was the ability for people to chunk up web services without necessarily building infrastructure. So for old timers here who have done IT for quite a while, you will know that ideally, if you wanted to go live on a web application, what you would do is to request for a virtual machine, request for a server. Prior to virtualization, it would actually be a physical hardware server, and that hardware would have an operating system installed on it. So it's either a Linux or it's either a Windows. And when your admin have installed the operating system, they will now install whatever third-party application that you need to use. Are you using WAMP? Are you using IIS to make it a web server? And then they would, grant you remote desktop access to it, right? Then virtualization came and everyone was excited with virtualization. Boom, you could just request for a virtual machine, whether it's a Linux machine or whether it's a Windows machine, and then you would have your services, your web service config. So either you're using the Nginx or you're using IIS or you're using WAMP, and it will be installed again, right? Now, what that meant when you wanted to look at it from even an administrative perspective is that somebody had to worry about the underlying operating system. Someone had to worry about the application. So when you now took that to security, it was the same thing. We had to worry about protecting the operating system, worry about patching the operating system, because those have become attack surfaces. Those are surfaces that can be attacked and they can now affect the application. You have to now worry about the web service application that was there. Now, virtualization has moved and evolved, and today we have what we call app services, meaning that if I need to launch an application that a web application that I want to host using a web service. So it could be WordPress. So I want to launch an application that is WordPress based. Instead of asking them to give me a WAMP server or give me a Linux server, so I will install this. The cloud service providers now have enabled you to request for app services. So you're just requesting for a highly reduced container that just gives you those app services. The good thing with this is that from an administrator perspective, you're not seeing any hardware, you're not seeing any operating system to manage, right? You're just focused on your services. You're calling out that service. All I want is a web service to be able to, deliver my application to my customers or to whoever I'm delivering the application to. And your app service will probably be talking to your database. We're not going to go into design and architecture here, but basically for app services too, the good thing is that you can use Defender for app services, and it helps you to also identify attacks that are targeting your applications that are running on app services. Okay, so because it's a web application, it doesn't have an underlying operating system that is visible to you, but it's that app service, is susceptible to certain kind of attacks. The Defender for app service will give you visibilities. So when attackers probe web applications, what they are trying to do is just to find exploits and weaknesses. So if you have a public-facing website, maybe an e-commerce website that is on the internet, when an attacker is doing an attack probe on your web application, what they're trying to do is find if you have, exploits and weaknesses or that can be exploited, right? And then they now worry about how they will route those requests to you. So the Defender for Endpoint does the same thing, be able to tell you that this your app service is exploitable to XYZ, and then give you possible recommendations or recommendations. Sometimes it could be an upgrade, sometimes it could be disabling XYZ or putting XYZ kind of functionality. So you could have an app service that is open to the internet for inbound connection and is listening on a non-secure service. At that point, the recommendation will be to put an SSL certificate so that you can encrypt that traffic. Okay, the Defender for storage. Now, one thing you must understand that Microsoft has done is that it has broken, the infrastructure into bits by bits. So if you see from when we started, we looked at server. So if your infrastructure on the cloud is you're still running the concept of I have virtual machines, that I am hosting on the cloud. The Defender for Endpoint the Defender for Cloud would recommend Defender for Endpoints on those devices, right? Because they are now endpoints, so that it can gain all those 5 benefits that the Defender for Endpoint gives, which is the firewall, the attack surface reduction, the behavioral analysis. It can give us the threat and vulnerability management. It can give us all of those things because that your server is now an endpoint, right? And then we also saw how you moved into app services. So all you're just doing is hosting an app service on the cloud. And so the Defender for app service can give you visibility into this web application because your app services are web services. And it can say, this is your web service, that you have. Because remember, your web service is just strictly whatever you are using, what type of application that you're using to provide that web service. So if it is an IIS, if it's WordPress, if it's WAMP, it will tell you that this particular version of web service or this web service based on the way it's been configured is exploitable, has XYZ weaknesses, and then these are the recommendations, and then it moves again to Defender for storage because your app server, your app service is feeding into a storage. Everything that is, when those web services are being consumed, they are feeding into a database that's feeding into a storage. The same thing with your server, the virtual machine that you have hosted, you have a storage located to it. Defender for cloud gives you Defender for storage, right? That once you enable it, you can be able to protect your storage, whether it's blob storage, whether it's the Gen2, whether it is your files, whether it is whether it's a Gen2 server, it will be able to feed into this storage container, and show you security alerts, on that storage, what is happening by feeding this data into the security operations analyst view, where you can get automatic response remediation. So if somebody is trying to, do like an SMB attack to your storage, trying to gain login access to your storage, it can be able to detect this thing and provide automatic response for you on your storage. Because what I like, these are different attack surfaces, right? Once you're on the cloud and you have enabled cloud services, each of these components are seen as entities now. Remember when we talked about entity and said email identity in the cloud, these are also entities, right? That people can use to exploit you, because if somebody goes after your storage, that's actually hitting your data, so you want to be able to see how your storage, the security posture of your storage environment in the cloud. And then we have our databases. Defender for cloud allows you to do what it calls the Defender for database, with specific to SQL. You'll be able to understand, how your SQL services are exposed. And Microsoft has splitted this into, you have the Azure SQL, and then you have the SQL. So even when you have installed SQL on virtual machines, so remember that when we explained the design for web applications, we said back in the days, people would have physical servers, then install operating system, then install web application, and then they'll call that server a web server. Now, what has happened is about 3 or 4 kind of entities are on that box. There's a physical device, then there's an operating system, then there's application that is making it a web server. Today, what cloud has done, it has broken it out. If all you want is a website service to provide all you want is a web server to provide a web service, you can use the app services, right? So that's the same thing with SQL. You can say, okay, my app service needs to talk to a database, but I don't necessarily want a full-blown virtual machine where I will worry about the operating system. All I want is a database that I can write to. So we have the Microsoft Defender, we have SQL databases as a service. And so there's Defender for SQL services like that, and also Defender for SQL on machines, SQL that you have installed on virtual machine, and you have made those virtual machines, SQL servers. And the good thing is that you can also still extend this Defender for database using the Azure Arc that we had explained, and extend it to your on-prem environment for your SQL servers. We all know how important our databases are. If I'm able to have investigated a fraud, and for some reason, the way the fraud happened was that the architecture that was used for the client's environment was that there was a connection from the web server straight to the database. So when the web server was exploited and the attacker landed on the web server and ran again exploit, run the NCAT on the web server to see listening ports and open ports. We discovered that from that web server, there was a direct connection to database. That's a very poor design. In architecture and security segmentation, your web server should be segmented to talk to your app, and then your app should be segmented to talk to your database. 100% your database should sit in your most secured environment, right? Now, this was very easy for the attacker, because once the attacker saw an open port connection to the database, it was easy to chunk up SQL Management Studio and begin to initiate commands. So without even logging into the application, the attacker was able to create a customer account to that database, elevate the customer's right, move money from customer A to B just by having access to the database. If you had the Defender in those kind of instances, it will begin to call out those things for you. So the Defender for endpoint almost is going to begin to be like things like database and DAM. So in on-prem environments, you have people using the DAMs now to protect their databases. Microsoft also has the Azure Cosmos DB and allows for threat protection on relational databases. So you have your Postgres SQL, your MySQL, your MariaDB. The Defender for databases extends its capabilities to this other open source relational database. So it's not only just for SQL databases that Defender for endpoints can protect. And so we have our Key Vault. One of the things that the cloud services does is gives us keys. So for your storage accounts, you have Key Vault. For your SSL certificates, for those who are involved in securing SSL certificates, when you create SSL certificates, it's expected that you create them in PKCS12, and so they require certificate keys, and those keys require passwords, and these passwords are vaulted. So most times attackers go to target your key vaults, because they know that once they're able to exploit your key vaults, they'll be able to get your keys, and once they have your keys, they can decrypt your traffic, and once they decrypt your traffic, they can see things in clear text: username and password, customers' transactions. So you want to be able to gain visibility into who is trying to access your key vaults and how much your key vault is exploitable. So Defender for Key Vault will allow you to be able to see where there's potential harm or attempts to access or exploit a key vault account, and it will give you how to address, these threats, without the need of putting a third-party security monitoring solution. Using the Defender for Cloud, that visibility can give you insight into your key vaults. So when you turn on the Defender for Key Vault inside the Defender for Cloud workloads, you'll be able to see what's happening into your key vaults. Are there exploits in your key vault? Are there exploitable are there exploits that are available or exploitable weaknesses in your key vaults, and then recommendations on how to fix them. We also have the resource manager, right? Resource manager is where you have your different resources that you use your resource manager to manage your different resources on Azure. So you have your Azure portal, your REST APIs, your command line, other programmatic clients that are on the Azure that you are using. You want to be able to see when someone is using a command line to be able to inject things into different resources. So we have the Defender for Resource Manager. So it's becoming very interesting how Defender for Cloud has broken down its capabilities into the different cloud workloads and how it can allow you see what is happening, how it can run advanced security analytics that will help you detect those threats and alert you about suspicious activities that are happening on these different workloads. Also, we know that when we're on the cloud service, a DNS service is a service that you're consuming. Okay, when you begin to set up services on the cloud, that's why I said that the cloud architecture is different from on-prem. Cloud begins to call each of these service workloads that we consume, because you could have a web service and you don't want to consume a DNS service for it. You could be okay with publishing that application with the IP, but if you wanted a DNS service, it meant that you are going to actually, be pointing that IP address to a DNS server, right? And so the Defender for Cloud allows you to also protect your DNS, where you can see where people are running queries to your DNS server, trying to get your DNS entries, trying to get SRV records. It will allow you to protect your DNS service. It provides that extra layer, where you can continuously monitor all the DNS queries to your DNS sources. Why are we getting this high level of probe on our DNS? What's happening? We're not doing a recruitment recruitment web service. Why are we getting this high hit? This is not a Black Friday. Why are we getting this high hits on our DNS server? There are lots of DNS queries on our DNS. So it's person trying to hit us and create a denial of service. Those level of advanced security, analytics that will alert you of suspicious behavior on your DNS service, you can now see it using the Defender for DNS. And then we know that now we have the technology called containerization, where you can just create a container now, and inside that container you have your different profiles, you have your different services, looking at things like the Kubernetes, even that connect to Azure. You can have, so from an architecture perspective, several applications will say, create a container for me. Inside this container, I'm going to be doing everything that I need to do inside this container, and you want to still be able to discover, benchmark those Kubernetes containers, with security policies, still do vulnerability assessment on those containers and check for advanced threat protection. Microsoft Defender for Cloud allows you to extend its capabilities to monitor, manage your containers, right? And it's called the Defender for Containers. Any questions so far? Okay, so what Defender for Cloud does is it will pick up these security alerts and incidents. It can detect threats. It can classify these alerts and then still continue to monitor. So all of this, it presents it in a single dashboard, like we saw in one of the slides there, where there's a single dashboard that will show you, your security posture, the detections, the recommendations, the endpoints that have these detections. We'll look at these remediations and alerts next week, but let's go and do an overview of Defender for Cloud. Any questions, please? Do I still have people in this class? It's extremely quiet. Okay, so, oh yeah, okay. So if you go to your portal.azure, if you wanted a demo, demo account, just go to portal.azure and you create a free, demo account for you and give you about 200 USD units that you can use to explore. I just did that, and then you come to and just type because I've typed it before. It's showing here, Defender for Cloud. I don't have much on this tenant. I just have one virtual machine, and then so remember where I said that you can choose to want to so you can see here, Security Center has detected virtual machines without the data collector agent. So when I enable this platform, when I enabled the Defender for Cloud, I didn't do anything. Already I had a virtual machine that I chunked up in the environment, and I didn't do anything. So imagine as a security analyst coming to Defender for Cloud, it can tell you that you have, workloads that are not protected. In this instance, I have only one virtual machine in this Azure subscription, and it has pointed it out that it's already alerting me that there is a workload here that doesn't have the data collection agent installed. Protect now by doing that. And so you can either go through your change management policies, or if you already have a policy that says all workloads should have the data collection agents, this already tells you compliance level that you have workloads that don't have it, And then I can say install agents. It's already initiating the agent installation, and then when it's done, we should be able to see here the status. So when you come here, this is an overview of your Defender for Cloud. This is the view that gives you your subscription, access resources, active recommendations, security and alerts. And then here will enable the Defender for Cloud to give you how to insights into your workloads, what's happening. This is where you begin to see recommendation. So by next week, we should be able to see devices. I just powered this up today, and I have one machine. I just have one machine. So hopefully it's going to come up, and then by next week, we'll gain more insight into it. But this is just an overview of your Defender for Cloud, how much you can see your security alerts, your inventory. This is where to list all the workloads that you have on the cloud. This is your security posture, where to tell you the security posture of your environment. Okay, if you have different workloads, if it was Azure, if I integrated AWS or GC, all of this would show up here. So during the course of the week, I would power on AWS service and GC service so that by next week class, we'll be able to see how it pulls AWS data into here and GC data into here. You to benchmark whatever it has found across the regulatory compliance for us to see, and you can actually download, this report. You check also your workload. You can see here I have one storage account, I have one server, I have one DNS subscription, and because we just installed the data collector log, it will begin to populate here, and we'll begin to see, our vulnerability assessment, SQL assessment, file integrity. It will break down the security posture of these workloads for us in this environment. So in summary, this is an overview today of what Defender for Cloud is. And in the next class, we'll be going deep dive to look at, the data is collecting from this workload. and how this data we can use it as a security operator. Any questions, please? In the absence of any question, we will call it a day for today. Thank you very much for your time. And please feel free to go to the YouTube channel to watch and watch a replay and drop your questions on the WhatsApp group for follow-up.
Thank you very much.